All right, so today, and then let me just make sure see, should come over the speakers there when it talks. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about the insulin. These are more so just, can you mark a syringe? Can you read a sliding scale? So it's not designed to be difficult. Um, when we look at the sliding scale, you're basically going to just be given a different insulin dose and then the glucose reading. And you're just going to look at what the patient has as far as their glucose level. And then you're going to look for the appropriate range. So this is 200. That fits into this range here for between 160 and 220. So you're going to administer 2 units. There's no math. There's no conversion. That's it. It's nice and short and sweet. So if they gave you 250, then you'd say 4 units. If they gave you 350, you'd say 8 units. Sometimes it'll say call the doctor, like if it's at 401 or greater. It just depends, and we'll probably see an example of that on the Blackboard test when we go through that, probably starting next week. All right, so that was pretty straightforward. Can you read a sliding scale? The next one is marking a syringe. So on Blackboard, they're just going to have you drop a point on a syringe. So you wouldn't have to do what I'm about to show you. You might have to do this next semester. I don't know if they do this question anymore. And I have a reference on the OneDrive folder that basically goes through and talks. It's always weird because I'm like talking to you, but I'm talking to people that aren't here. And so anyways, don't feel like you have to look back at me. Sorry. When on OneDrive folder, and I took a copy of a page of the book that basically shows when they're marking the syringe, and basically they kind of want you to mimic what's actually happening. So this question actually has a couple components to it. The first component is, can you add 2 numbers? You can. Can you choose the correct syringe? So that is important. That's actually, there's 2 different syringes and you only want to use one type. And then sometimes they'll ask you to mark the solution and the amount to be drawn up first. And there's some extra marks here. So I'm going to show you first what you will probably see in regards to your test on Blackboard. It'll probably just be drop a point at the total, and then it'll probably just be 1 syringe, or it might even just choose between 2 syringes. So when you're dealing with insulin, okay, insulin's measured in units. And it's pretty much the only medication that is going to also be administered in units, and the syringe is specific for units. And it probably has a lot to do with the fact that we don't want to complicate insulin by adding more measurements and more calculations, especially when we're giving these to patients and they're self-administering their insulin. When they're self-administering their insulin, they're being told to take so many units, and so they use unit syringes. So when you're choosing between the 2 syringes, you want to look for a clue that would indicate which one you should use as far as insulin having units. This one's measured in cc's. This one's measured in cc's as well, but then it also says units here. So you're always going to choose the unit syringe when you're dealing with insulin. Okay, so you'll see this example on the Blackboard test. You'll see 2 syringes side by side, and then the 1 syringe will clearly be noted when units. That's the one you use. It doesn't even ask you to necessarily mark the total on there or not, but if it does, this is what we're going to do next. So it says the patients receive 10 units regular and 40 units of U100. So all you're going to do is add those 2 together. So 10 plus 40. So they're going to get 50 units total. That's supposed to be a 5. So 50 units total. So you're going to put a mark at 50. Okay. You might end up putting like a cursor at 50 if we're talking about on Blackboard, but you're going to put a mark at 50 units. Okay. And that's your total. Now, one of the things that's important to know is like this syringe, if you pay attention, it goes from 40 to 50 and there's only, what is it, 4 or 5 like little tick marks. So what that means is that these aren't 1 unit increments. So if we count it out, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, it doesn't make sense. We have to count by twos, 62, 64, 66, 68, 70. So that's the other thing that's important to know about these things is they're going to have to give you an even number unit when you're answering this, as well as making sure that you mark it correctly. So like if your total is 82, they want to make sure you drop that point right at 82 or mark it right at 82. Okay. Now, the other thing it tells you is the solution amount to be drawn up first. So if you don't know this already, you always draw regular insulin first. It's clear. You probably heard that the saying "clear before cloudy." There's probably other reasons for that, but you're going to draw 10 units of regular first. I'm just write R first. So 10 units of regular insulin first. Now, this is where it gets like weird, and this is where I don't even understand why this is even important for you to do. But in the process of drawing insulin, you're going to stick your there's like a you pull out the plunger and you push air into so there's a whole procedure, and you're basically trying to mimic what you're doing in that. But what they're saying is when you draw the 10 units first, the 10 units is actually going to be closer to the plunger side of the syringe. So your 10 units of regular insulin is actually in this little area right here. That 10 unit increment is between 40 and 50. And then the NPH is everything else. So from here to here is the NPH. Okay. In reality, if you've done this already, you know the insulin mixes. So there's no way that it's separate or not separating, but they sometimes will ask this question, and it's just important to know that your regular insulin is inside this spot here. So technically the correct way to label this would be to make sure you're indicating all the different scenarios. So if you go onto the OneDrive folder, I have a thing on there. And let me see if I can pull that up. Hold on one second. And then, you know what? I closed out of that already, so I don't have it. But if someone reminds me on a future time, if need be, I'll pull it up maybe on Wednesday's review or Tuesday's review, and I'll make sure I pull it up so you can see it. Okay, so you can at least see the graphic that I'm referencing instead of me just telling you that. But it's in the main dosage calc practice folder where there's a bunch of stuff listed there. Just kind of like there's pictures of labels and there's some other helpful little things there. Okay, so those are the insulin type questions. We worked through these last time. I'm sorry, can't even see what I'm pointing at. But we worked through these last time when we calculated the injections. And so if you need any additional practice, just let me know. But I'm going to dive into the next thing.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can be the total number, can be the total units of regular and NPH odd number?
Say that one more time.
So can be the total number of units of regular insulin and NPH odd number, like 59 or like 61?
Oh, good question. So not on the syringe pictured. So you can't estimate. You have to be specific. So if they give you a question like this, and it's a syringe that has odd numbers, a syringe that has even number increments or increments by 2, then they could not give you an odd number total.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Turn this volume up because I thought it would be louder. Okay, good question. Yeah, so they can't give that to you, at least not in a fair kind of question, because you're not supposed to estimate insulin. You want to give them a specific like 2, 4, 6. In fact, patients will use like a little clicker device and it just automatically sucks up the number of units that they need. And then they can just inject it if they're not on a pump. All right. So the last kind of dilemma we have here that I haven't gone over yet was these fluid replacement questions. And so we're going to go through that real quick. I have a separate sheet of paper. And I'm going to just start writing associated with that. So what I did is dimensional analysis works just fine on this. It's just that the way you would say it doesn't like vibe. So I think what I usually like to do is just like it's just creating a ratio. And what I mean by that is we can kind of do a comparison where we take we have urine output and replacement volume, and then we have our actual urine output. So I'm going to show you a formula that I kind of just arranged for this particular type of problem, but I'll also show you like kind of where I derived it from. So these questions will state, and you'll see this on the practice test, the Blackboard test. For every 125 milliliters of urine output, you're going to replace with 40 milliliters of water via PEG tube every 4 hours. And it says if the urine or the actual urine output for the last 4 hours was 500 milliliters, then what would the replacement volume be? Okay, so there's a couple ways you can do this. Sometimes students just say, well, what's this relationship 125 to 500? And then they do that same relationship to 40. What I mean by that is if you know, like, let's say your replacement volume is 40 milliliters, your output volume is 125 milliliters. And if we set this equal, we're looking for this, and then my total output is actually 500. So you've probably done something like this way back when in like middle school. And you can even do like, you know, what is the multiple to get to 500? So you can just plug in some numbers. You can do 500 divided by 125. But the multiple from 125 to 500 is 4. And so we're going to do that same multiple here. So 4 times 40 is 160 ml. Now, not everyone likes that particular strategy, and that's fine. You don't have to like that particular strategy. I have some other ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to denote a couple things. So the 125 milliliters is what we call our kind of expected output. So that's what we expect to come out of the patient. 40 milliliters is the replacement. We'll just say in. And then the 500 milliliters, that's supposed to be a 5. 500 milliliters is the actual out. And then what we're looking for is how many milliliters for like basically the actual in. So maybe I should call that expected. Anyways, so what we can do is we can kind of create a formula from this that basically you're going to take whatever the actual output is. You're going to put that over the expected output and then multiply by the replacement. And when you do that, you'll get to the same answer. So I try not to, especially for you guys like kind of trying to wrap your heads around this, like this topic, try not to give you so much of like new formulas, but you're already kind of working with a couple different ones, right? You got ordered over available or desired over have, you have dimensional analysis, and now I'm throwing this other one at you. And basically what we're going to do is just follow this out. I'm going to take whatever my output was, 500 milliliters. I'm going to put that over whatever I expected to be the output, 125 milliliters. times my replacement volume. And that's going to get me to the same answer, that same 160 milliliters. So you can do it any way that seems fit. Some you can even cross multiply here. Some of you have been itching to do that. You could do that in that scenario. Some of you hate like variables like X's and Y's and Z's in math. So we don't have to introduce those things. That's why I just did the ×4. We just find out what that relationship is. And then if you ever wonder like, well, how do I find out this relationship if I don't know offhand? I just take 500 and I divide it by 125. And that'll give me that relationship of where that 4 comes from, if you're not quite sure.
So dividing them, it's always make sure that, so it's always helping you to find the same relationship between them.
Right. You're just looking for you're looking for the relationship between the two numbers. So you're either going to, if that relationship or that number is going to get bigger, then you multiply by 4. If it gets smaller, then you need to adjust for that as well. So that means like sometimes, like let's say it went from 125 to 75 milliliters as your actual output, then you might need to divide. But I will say, I think for the most part, it's usually a bigger number, so you won't have to worry about that too much. But just in case you see it. So let's try the second one. So the second one says, and I'll just write out the important stuff just in case you can't see it. So it says for every 100 milliliters out, replace with 30 milliliters. And then my actual out was 400 milliliters. And then the question is, how many milliliters are we going to give the patient? So try that one. I mean, I know the key already has the answer to it, but just make sure you're getting the same thing. And then if you're virtual, just write it down, or you can put it in the chat, or you can unmute and say what you got. Also, if you want to say what you got, you can do that too. So it says for every 100 milliliters of urine output, replace with 30 milliliters of water. If the urine output for the last 3 hours is 400 milliliters, then what would the replacement volume be? Okay. Amber, I think your answer is correct. I'm just waiting.
I got 120.
That's what I got too. Did you get an answer, Austin? Okay, that's okay. Let's find out. What'd you get? 120. Good. Yeah, so like in my mind, I just sit there and I try and like figure or think about this problem, and I say, okay, 100 to 400, what's that relationship? Times 4. So 30 times 4 would be the 120 ml. So, but they want you to show your work, they want you to draw stuff, and I want to give you strategies where, like, because I always tell, like, when I'm working with my son with math, I always tell him, like, when he's sitting there doing nothing, I said, math is doing stuff. Just start writing something down, write down these things, and then you'll figure it out as you're writing it out. That's the hope. Okay. So just kind of start off that process that way. Like I said, sometimes I have previously on previous practices and previous reviews, like I've thrown out like the 100 milliliters, and let's say it was 50 milliliters of the actual output. And it's just mainly to pay attention to when you're thinking through this problem, like if they voided less than what was expected, then the volume replacement would be less than what it was. So like for this one, if it's 100 milliliters expected replaced with 30, and then they only voided 50 milliliters, then the replacement volume would be 15 because it would be half of what was expected. So you can still do this calculation. You can still find that relationship. Saying that, I don't think you're gonna have to worry about doing like less amounts. So it'll probably be a big amount. So. All right, so over the course of these, I guess this is the fourth review, we've really covered all of the question types for the practice set. Are there any questions from the practice set that you are itching to kind of see work through, or just make sure you have it down? Or any other questions in regards to the test?
For the test, since it is going to be on the computer, you probably said this, are we gonna have to put the like ml, liter, like are we gonna have to label our answer?
So there should be directions before you take the test. And then you just want to make sure you follow the directions. So like if it tells you to include your units, yes. If it tells you to only give a numerical answer, then only give a numerical answer. So it just depends. Like on the practice Blackboard test, it tells you numerical answer only.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. And I
And
did that. I actually went through and I added that as a direction because when I was working with students, they were like getting it back and they got like 0 out of 27 or whatever's questions are there. They're like, what am I doing wrong? I was like, you didn't do anything wrong. You just included your units and the key doesn't include the units. And so I added that as a direction. So yeah, it just depends on what the directions say.
okay.
My assumption is they're just going to ask you for the number only. And the reason being is because I do this when I do a NSG 104 like remediation, and I'll have students and I'll tell them to include their units, but sometimes they'll just write like 140 ml with no space, or they'll write a space. And when I keyed it, I included a space. So that's where they go wrong, is how that works. So there's like, it's just a nuance of Blackboard. So my assumption is they're going to ask you or tell you only put the numerical answer.
Okay, so pay attention to that part.
Yeah, and if you don't know, like ask. But my assumption is when they go through and they check your grade, they'll sit there and they'll say like, oh, okay, they included the units. I don't think that docks you points. They'll just go back and award you the points.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome, Amber. Good question. Do you have any questions, Austin? Have you gone through this already? Oh, okay. Okay. Make sure you go through it and practice it.
Do you know if all 25 questions will be like solve the problem, or it will be like also like converting numbers?
So it'll be a combination. So like the way that this is written out, like where you have some conversion problems and then some kind of short answer or short kind of word problems, it'll be a combination. And then some pictures marking the tubes or marking the cup, marking the syringe, marking the tube X. So you're going to see kind of like a mixture of the things, very similar to what's on the paper. But have you taken the Blackboard practice test yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to look very similar to that.
Okay.
So it'll be a combination of all those things. Have you taken the Blackboard practice test?
Do you know if we should like
It's in the when you go into the calculation workshop, that page, underneath like that where I've noted like when we're meeting, underneath that it says Dosage Calc practice, and it's located in there. So when you click on that, you'll find it. It's underneath where you would download this. Yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Do I have to like show every step of this while like solving the problem?
So it just depends. They always tell you to show your work. So I don't know how much they want you to show. And you can even ask that question to your lab instructor just to find out, like, when you say show my work, what are you looking for? Because they're gonna have you fill it out on scratch paper. Um, and I don't know, like, I know that some people can just like, I think most people who feel confident about like moving their decimal for like milligrams, grams, micrograms, you could probably do that in your head and you don't have to worry about it. But they probably want you to at least write something or use your scratch paper so it doesn't look like you memorized answers or you're cheating, I guess is the thing. But I would ask your instructor what they want you to show specifically.
Okay, I was just wondering because since we like taking on the blackboard, like how we supposed to show the steps, you know what
Yeah,
I
they're
mean?
going to give you a blank sheet of paper and they're
Okay.
going to ask you to write on that paper. I just don't know like what they're looking for. Like, I don't know. I don't know like what specifically. However, I will say this, especially on problems that like you maybe like get stuck on to some extent, working it out. Then when you go back and review, in case you do miss that particular question, you can kind of see where you went wrong and then hopefully make adjustments from there.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll just leave it at that. I'll be back on and live on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, so Tuesday at 11, Wednesday at 1, I think I said 1 or 1:30, and then Thursday at 4:30. So there's a couple more review times. We've kind of gone through the meat of everything. The next couple times, I'm probably just going to go through the practice Blackboard test, just so you can kind of see how that's answered and keyed and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll see if there's any additional practice. And as always, if you have questions between now and the next review, just email me, let me know. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yep, you too. Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thanks, you too.